What's up, everybody? I'm excited today. We've walked through the last couple weeks before the prayer time, walking through casting vision. And I want to first of all just say thanks to a ton of you guys. I know I've been using the book, and man, that's just inspiring, and I've been loving hearing stories on that. So thank you. It's just cool getting a partner together in that way. We added one extra week to the series that I talked about just for like the last couple minutes last time. But we're going to call today Casting Vision in Your Legacy Church. Whether you are the lead pastor or not, how do you do that? And I've got three different guys that are going to share a little bit today of their stories and what they're doing. And then I'm going to end it with sharing some things that I've learned the hard way. So I'm going to give you a bunch of don'ts that myself and some of the other coaches, we just kind of were talking and said, man, here's some stuff we did along the way. I want to give you the one image as we dive in that that I introduced last time, and I'm not going to walk through the whole thing as well, and I'm not saying this is gospel truth, but just some things we've learned along the way, that if you are trying to live out DMM principles in a legacy church, that we've sure learned, I think the way to do it is to have thinking of two lanes. And so I won't walk through all the details of it, but the lane one is those excited to apply DMM principles and open to regular accountability. And would just say the stuff that we do on this call, as you're living that out, I think every single week will be helpful. But then there's a second part. If you're leading in a legacy church, or you're part of a legacy church, and that would be the lane two, and that's everyone else that isn't too annoyed with your passion to make them disciple makers. And last time we shared and really focused on the lane one just for the very end of the vision casting talk. Today, we're going to focus on lane two, but I just want to highlight to go, hey, if you're a legacy pastor and you missed this, don't skip it. Lane one is massive. In fact, here's how I would say it. If you don't do lane one and you're just doing lane two, the word I would use is you're not necessarily doing DMM, you're doing DMM-ish. DMM is getting some people together and going, hey, we are passionate and we're living this out. Now, at the same time, let me say, hey, I think you got some really exciting advantages that if you're a legacy pastor, some challenges and some advantages with living out lane two. And we're going to talk about that today. And so let me close this. But let me share a couple highlight things, and I'll introduce some people that will kind of take over from here. The first one is a big positive is if you've got a big pool to fish from people that love Jesus and hopefully love you. If you're a legacy church pastor trying to do this, which is huge, and you're fishing for individuals and families to get in lane one, right? To go, man, I'm casting this vision and inviting them to be a part of this thing, and it'll change their lives just like it's changed you. I throw in a negative too, and that would just be, you've likely conditioned them, and other church experiences have maybe before you, that what you're now calling them is way more than they need to do as a Christian. So it might be difficult in that you've set them up to fail, or at least I would say I did. The bar that I set before, all of a sudden I've raised it, or we've raised it if you're doing leading a legacy church. And so there's gonna be some challenges of them going, wait a minute, this isn't necessarily what I signed up for. But today we want to get just insanely practical with this. And the first guy who's going to share is Kevin Baker. And he really inspired me in terms of going, hey, we should add a week onto this series to talk about this for anyone who's involved in a legacy church or helping others do that. And so, Kevin, will you share first just some of the things you'd share with me, some things you've learned about, hey, inspiring the masses in your church? And then we're going to have Drake share a little bit, and then Trace is going to share a little bit as well, too. So, Kevin, hey, take it away, man.
Thank you, Jim. Well, I'm going to do what Jim asked me to do. Here's the ways that we cast vision for DMM in our legacy church. I guess I should say I am the senior pastor. I do think it's harder to do this if you're just on staff. It's hard to transition a church or engage a church when you're not the senior leader or don't have the senior leaders partnership in that. But our whole mission is now DMM. Everything about our mission, we moved from. So I would say one of the ways that we've cast vision is just to cast the vision of what God's called us to do. And So our mission, our vision for our church has nothing to do with building our church. It's basically making disciples that make disciples and seeing the kingdom grow. And so we just continue to run that mission. That again, of course, took the partnership and the leadership of the board. So I had to take them through it. That was the first way that we cast vision, was to ask the board if they would go through this with me. And thankfully I think they caught the vision. All of them were like, "Oh my goodness, this is what God's calling us to." So I had their partnership in this. I continue to have their partnership in this, which is, I think, somewhat unusual and just a blessing. Of course, we cast vision using sermons. We're again, all of our messages now are aimed at equipping. Even the way that we're doing sermons, we're going to the way that we do our services, our worship time as a church has been transformed as well. But I think preaching on this, casting vision through sermons, using the pulpit's a great thing. We started, my staff asked me to do this, and if you've been a Legacy Church, this is a fearful thing. They asked me if we could put a microphone up and ask people to just come up and share stories about how they were being spiritually obvious but not obnoxious, how they were having spiritual conversations. Just invite them to share their stories. And I was scared to death of that, because you hate a microphone that you don't know what people are going to say and how that's going to go. And I was as worried that no one would come up as I was of what they would say when they came up. But we've been doing that for a couple of years now, and man, has that been a culture shifting impact, because it's one thing for the professionals to stand up and say, "This is what we're doing," or "This is what you ought to do." It's another thing for the people that they go to church with to stand up. And they were always, we've had people stand up and they're like, "I'm so nervous that, I don't usually do this." It really just shows the vulnerability, but it shows the rawness, the authenticity of people saying. And we've had crazy funny stories. If you were at Oakdale today and you walked in on a Sunday and said, "Hey, can someone tell me the Captain Crunch story?" Everybody here that's been here for a year would be able to tell you that, which was basically just one of our guys talking about trying to get used to praying for people when he saw needs or when he was having conversations. And the way he described that story was being in the cereal aisle, and he basically failed. He had a conversation with someone, saw that there was a need, asked if he could pray for them, and they said yes, but he didn't pray for them in the moment. And so he kind of ended the story by saying, "Here I was right there in the Captain Crunch aisle, and I just let God down." And so everybody remembers the Captain Crunch aisle story, but it really has done a lot. I would say this: you can shift culture using the stories of everyday disciple makers better than you can using the stories of those they see as the professionals. And so it's been a huge culture shift. The way we do our small groups has changed. We have added accountability and mission into every small group, that we sort of have an up, in, and out way that we talk about this. Like, hey, every group needs to do, the up is toward God. What are you doing to draw closer to God, to help all of us become more like God? The in is towards nurturing the group, but the out is, how are you on mission together? And so we're not formulating that for them. We're just inviting them to be strategic in how they're on mission together. We've had some guys that are getting together and going over, and we've got a youth house where people from the community, troubled youth, are from the community, and our guys are now discipling those guys. A lot of churches, I think, have gone over and just served them food or whatever. Our guys are actually encountering them, talking with them, and doing discovery with them, and it's been amazing. So we don't allow small groups. I shouldn't say we don't allow. Adults get to do what they want, but we don't endorse anything except a small group structure that has accountable discipleship and missional components to how we're going to do that together. It really has affected what we say yes to and what we say no to. So we cast vision in a sense by what we say yes to and what our partnerships are, how they're developing. For instance, we churches have done VBS, Vacation Bible School, right, forever, and those end up just being kind of programs. Well, we began to sense God was targeting a neighborhood from about 10, 15 minutes from us that is very culturally different from where we are. It's primarily Brazilian. There's some other Latin American folks, but anyway, so we decided that instead of inviting them to us, we would take a VBS down for them and just begin to develop relationships with the people down there. We've been working on relationships down with those folks now for over a year, and it's just been surprising. Both discovery groups have come out of that, but just nurturing a sense of relationship with those folks. The language barrier is something we're constantly working on, but it's really been a blessing. So we don't just do a VBS here. In fact, we advertise all the time, hey, join us as we take the mission of blessing kids with the gospel down to a neighborhood that you can just be a part of. Families are doing that. That's another thing. We've been really amazed at how families, the biggest hunger that we're seeing in the church right now is parents want to know, how can I disciple my kids? I mean, it's been amazing to us that parents are there. They realize, I think they realize in the culture that we live in, that they can no longer just farm this out to the church or farm this out to the school system or whatever. And so they are hungry for resources. I would say one of the best things that we've seen is how hungry parents are. Teach me how to disciple my kids. And then when we have kids, we have one of our high schoolers that has just been doing discovery with his friends. I won't tell you this whole story, but basically a couple of weeks ago, he stood up and shared about a year ago, he started a discovery group with some of his friends. One of his friends was reluctant to get started. They were not a believer, not really engaged in any kind of religious church, anything. And he began to come, and this young man gave his life to Christ. Unfortunately, as a result of that discovery group, unfortunately, about 6 months later, he tragically died. And so the witness was this high schooler standing up and talking about his own confidence in where his friend was, because he had taken the time to invite him to this discovery group and what God had done as a part of that discovery group, which was just what probably wasn't a dry eye in the house that day. I think we have really tried to see ourselves now as in the role of not informing people, but equipping people. So everything that we do, we try to run through, is this equipping them? Is there something that we're giving them that they can practice, that they can do right now, that, this is exactly, so we're really just done with trying to give people information. That does frustrate some, but we just continue to even use those conversations as vision casting times. Like, hey, so if you know something, wouldn't it be better to be equipped to do something? And so we just continue to press in on the vision of that. Even what we've put in, we've redesigned the interior of our church so that we're constantly trying to remind people of those in, out, and up rhythms. Our website, we've redesigned our website, and we're redesigning it again. I think one of the things that, most churches, I think of their website as simply the place where you can check us out and see if you want to come, because we're no longer really inviting people to come. I mean, what we're trying to do is equip them. And so we're completely redesigning our website again so that it can be a resource for equipping. And you don't have to ever come into the church, but like, hey, if you're interested, and so it's not to where that'll be launched at the end of April, but we are investing a whole lot in making our website just another equipping place instead of an advertising place, just a tool in and of itself. I started a podcast, a few years ago called Guerrilla Discipleship, not the animal gorilla, but I basically cast this vision of guerrilla warfare. And I said, the institution church likes to see itself as this big army, but what God is doing is inviting each of us to really be in mission with him. And so I started casting this vision of, how are you going to be used of God right where you are? And so we just kept the name, even though it's probably not the most popular name, Uh, but we're just every week trying to again use that as an equipping tool for here's some things we just go over the DMM. By the way, we decided not to take everybody in our church through DMM training. We did take some of the leaders through it as people here, and we don't talk about DMM. We talk about disciple making. DMM felt like it was like you were either on the inside or the outside. Like, oh, if you knew what DMM was, then you were on the inside. So we just keep talking about disciple making. We never use the word discipleship. We use the word disciple making. But instead of training people, we just wanted to get them practicing. And so we just started giving them equipping to start practicing right where they were in some way. I think I stole the phrase spiritually obvious without being obnoxious from Roy Moran. And I have worn that out. Everybody knows that phrase here. And I can tell you, our folks really liked that because I think they were afraid they were going to be obnoxious, and they had been around people who were obnoxious. And that was like, I don't want to be obnoxious. And so as you disarm the obnoxious, as you own it, as we've kind of owned it, like, hey, yeah, sometimes we can be obnoxious. We don't want to be those kind of people. We want to be relational, and we want to be strategic in how we develop relationships and let God use us. People have really, I think it's disarmed some of the fear and some of the reluctance to be engaged in disciple making. The crazy thing about this also, I just have one more thing, but the crazy thing is we have not done, I mean, our church before we were doing, hey, there's 20,000 postcards going out. We haven't done any of that in years. We are attracting more people today than probably we ever have. We have more visitors on a regular basis. And they're actually coming because they're hearing about the equipping, and they're like, this is what I've been longing for. Now, I will say we're not attracting lost people. We're attracting folks who have been in the church but are looking for something deeper than apparently what the church, and we all know the attractional model is coming to an end. I mean, it seems clear that the attractional model is coming to an end. So I think people are beginning to sense that. I think people are hungering for it. I think disciple making casts a vision that young people are interested in. They want to see a faith that can change the world. They want to believe in something that can have an impact beyond just making me a nice person. And so I think it's a very attractive vision for them. And we begin to, we can begin right away. The other thing I would say we do in terms of casting vision is just what we measure. We stopped measuring how many people were here and all the rest of that. We started measuring, hey, how many spiritual conversations are we having? What's going on? How many? And our wildly important goal that we're working on right now is to see 70,000 hearts come into alignment in a relationship with Jesus through disciple making. We want to see 7,000 homes. What we realized is that a lot of our people in our culture, one person or maybe even both people are Christians, but they're not practicing any rhythms of disciple making or of being a disciple in their home with their kids. And so we want to see 7,000 homes really engaged in what it means to live a lifestyle of disciple making. And then we want to see 700 communities. And a community is just an affinity group, your bowling league or whoever. So we're trying to impact 700 communities. And then our last thing is, and we said it because this is the way it seemed to come to us, 70 countries, but we really are emphasizing and even training our people on what an unreached people group is. It's amazing how many Christians have no idea what an unreached people group. And so just talking to them about, hey, and the county that our church is in has 4 of the most diverse cities in the nation are located within our county. It's 1.2 million people here. Approximately 140 languages are spoken in this county. And what we keep saying is we don't have to spend money going anywhere. These people are right here. Let's connect to them. And they're still connected back home. They're still connected back to their nation somewhere. And if we can relationally begin to show them and equip them and ignite a passion in them for following Jesus, then they'll pass it on naturally to their families and their friends back home. And we will never have to travel or be outsiders trying to introduce the gospel into a culture that we don't know. We'll use the people who are a part of that culture. And it really has been Amazing. I could share some more stories with you, but I think that's my time. Thanks for letting me take a minute with this, Jim, and thanks for doing this.
Hey, thanks, Kevin. No, that's super inspiring and very helpful. And man, what a great model context. Hey, I'm gonna have Kevin and the other guys all be able to answer some questions at the end. So we're gonna go straight to Drake. Drake is in Colorado, living this out, and I know his name said Big Papa a minute ago. I don't know if it still does. Anyways, Drake, you ready to roll?
I'm ready, man. Yeah. Well, now you know my secret. They like to call me Big Papa. So sorry about that. That's when your phone resets and you forget to change your name. Sorry about that. So my name is Drake. I'm the that's hilarious. Well, never gonna unforget that one. I'm a pastor in Boulder, planted a church. Actually, our church just turned 5 on Sunday. So huge deal. Survived COVID. Uh, Honestly, the church is doing great. And so obviously, for all intents and purposes, it's a legacy church in some senses. Kevin, thanks for sharing, man. Really inspiring to see a church that's more established working really, really hard to like steer the Titanic. So that's really, really cool. For us, at 5 years since we started, we said anything we look up and we don't like at City Church in 5 years in one of the hardest cities in America to plant in, what was called the church planting graveyard when we moved here. Anything we don't like about City Church is going to be our fault, and so we have known that since day one, and we've seen God do some amazing things. But over the last couple of years, God has been really shifting. Our mission has never moved. Our mission has always been the same mission that all of us on this call carried. But how we carry out that mission is consistently changing. And so, what I want to share with you very simply is Jim started sharing disciple making movements with me. Went to India with him, caught a vision, and experientially got to be a part of seeing God do some things that I've just never seen before. And so, a lot of things have shifted in my life over the last 2 years. Um, and as our church has just turned 5, we've seen lots of people saved and baptized and all those things. And it's been amazing. But our prayer since day one has been to reach 1% of our city, see people's hearts and lives transformed, follow Jesus, baptized, and starting to practice the way. Um, and so that's 1,100 people in our local context in our city, seeing our church directly impact 1,100 people. And when I was in India this last year, God very specifically said, "Hey, I gave you that prayer. I love that prayer. That's something I have put in you. But what you're missing is a strategy to actually carry out that prayer. And so it's great to pray for 1,100 people, but how are you actually going to see it happen?" And so over the last year, we begin to pray, cast vision, and actually develop people into the kinds of people that are making disciples. Specifically, if we're going to reach 1,100 people, and again, that's the prayer would be that's just the beginning, like we're seeing all around the world, any movement. When people start to live this out, that's only the beginning. So 1,100 people, that'd be 110 disciple makers in our church that all make 10 disciples, baptize them themselves, so they have that vision, they're intentional living on mission, and they actually teach them to follow Jesus. We know it won't stop with them. And so that's our current focus as a church, 5 years old, moving into this next year, and maybe the next decade, whatever God has for us. But the one thing, a couple of things I would just, I felt the Holy Spirit said I should share with you is words in my ears that keep ringing. Oh, 3 of them. Number one is the movement leader in India. He said, "Hey, your calling is to be a bamboo tree, not a banyan tree." And he's talking to the leaders on the ground. But what he also, the Spirit was speaking to me. So your job is not to create a banyan tree, a bigger church. You're never going to reach 1,100 people. You're never going to cram them into the building that you have right now. But God is big enough to use all the people that you have to make 1,100 disciples. And so bamboo tree, not banyan tree. Number 2, one of my coaches used to say, "Move with the movers and love everybody." And one of the things I realized really quickly, especially with Jim coaching me, was that not everybody's ready for this. Like I couldn't shift our entire church into like, "Hey, by the way, we're just doing this now." I mean, I could, but that wasn't necessarily what I felt like God was calling us to. And so what I very felt specifically was number 1, whether City Church ever gets this or not, which that's not the prayer, but like just the focus was, you know what, no matter what happens with training and DMM and things like that, I want to be the kind of person that lives like this. I want to become the kind of person that makes disciples in this way. When Jim first taught me all of this, I immediately learned, man, I met Jesus at 15 years old. I didn't grow up in church. And if someone would have taught me to think and live this way, the way I made disciples would have been radically different at an early age. And so now I'm like, man, this is it. This is no matter what happens with City Church, this is how I'm going to live. So my current prayer for 2024 is God use me to make 10 disciples, baptize them myself, and teach them to practice the way of Jesus. I baptized my aunt in January by God's grace. She's brand new follower of Jesus, some crazy cool stuff. I met a guy at a wedding 2 weeks ago, and he just starts having spiritual conversations with me. So I met with him yesterday. I taught him Discovery Bible Study. He's reading the book of John with me. And I'm praying that dude is going to give his life to Jesus, get baptized in Louisiana, where he's at. He's going to make disciples of his roommates. So whatever. I'm just praying for 10 disciples personally. And then again, move with the movers and love everybody. As we look at our church, about 150 people that call City Church home, we're just identifying the people that are catching the vision for it and really slowly dripping it, living it out, and watching those things come alive in people's hearts. And so I've got a meeting with roughly 20 individuals coming up in like 3 weeks. We're all going to, some of them have been trained already, but we're going to go through Jim's book together. And the challenge is for every single one of them, take at least one person along with them in this book for those 21 days. And it's beginning to drip the vision of living missionally, both in our city and then whoever they take through it. And so again, we're a little early on in this, 2 years for me personally, a year for our church. But what I'm seeing is the people that do want it. If we're moving with the movers and loving everyone, then man, the people that are getting it are excited and they're seeing lives change. They're beginning to baptize people. They're beginning to help them follow Jesus. And we're praying that 110 people will say, God, use me to make 10 disciples and baptize them and teach them to follow you. And we're praying that's still in the beginning. So that's kind of where we are. And we got a lot that we're unlearning and figuring out. But I'm in this call every week because you guys are encouraging me and helping me process and helping me relearn and grow. So thanks for the opportunity to share.
Awesome. Thank you, Drake. That was perfect. Hey, one more. So Trace is in my area. We've been doing ministry together for a while. And Trace, hey, share with us what it looks like leading a legacy church and casting vision to them in your DMM.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate it, guys. Two awesome stories. So my context, planted the church 10 years ago, actually a week apart from Jim planting his church, with a focus on the military. So even though we're 10 years old, it really feels like we have a brand new church every couple of years. It's kind of sort of a revolving door by design. That's a good thing and a bad thing, depending on how you look at it. But essentially, when Jim shared with me the idea of DMM and how I can incorporate that into my own life, I did what a lot of people do as a legacy church pastor and just kind of went hard and fast to the congregation and say, hey, we're going to do all these things. And I got a bunch of blank stares and nobody was running out the doors, but nobody was participating. So it was like, okay, that's not it. And God just clearly said, if you're going to do this, if you're going to lead this church in this direction, you must become a practitioner yourself and you've got to do it. And so I took basically the next year to do that, to go out with Jim and some other guys in the area twice a week. We're going out prayer walking and slowly began to incorporate my own stories and some of others, some Jim's and some other people's stories from the pulpit. Just, hey, guys, this is what's happening in my life. This is what I see God doing. This is how it's been happening. And coupled that then, this is over the course of a year and a half or 2 years. So you kind of get a context there as well. Slowly start sharing my stories and shifting the focus of my teachings to include a lot of biblical principles about disciple making. So sharing about Luke 10, Matthew 10, going through the 4 soils, just really reiterating over and over again, like, this is not my good idea. This is what disciple making I think that Jesus had in mind. So that got some eyebrows raised and people started to shift in their seats a little bit, but it was okay because I wasn't asking of anything of them yet. Then I started asking for the prayers of the people. It's like, okay, nobody's ready yet to go out with me, but will you commit to praying for me as I go out? So I started a sort of a group chat in WhatsApp. And every time we went out, I said, hey, we're going out on the streets, please pray. And then afterward, I'd say, hey, this is what your prayers did. please pray for so and so and so and so. So I got people involved by praying with me as I was going out. After that, the shift in language that I think really got people's eyes opened was the shift from an approach to accumulating knowledge and walking in obedience. I think familiar language probably for most of you is obedience-based discipleship versus knowledge-based. So we started shifting what we're talking about when we say discipleship and disciple making. I think that's been a kind of a trend in what people have said so far this afternoon. That really helps people to open their eyes to see, okay, what I've been doing maybe isn't exactly what disciple making according to the Bible really is. Now the next phase is inviting people to come out with us prayer walking. So we've kind of been walking down this path. Let's get onto the streets and do this. And that was a far fewer number of people, but some came out, and was encouraging to see them coming out. And yeah, very few people, but small steps is what this whole story is about. I think small, faithful, obedient steps in the same direction. Here locally, we got really serious at the end of last year about praying collectively for disciple making purposes. And so God opened the door and said, hey, why don't you invite the people that you've been working with to pray with this team once a week on Saturday mornings at 7:30 for disciple making. I'm like, okay. So put it out to the people, and several people have joined in that, and they're there most Saturday mornings at 7:30 praying for disciple making in our community, which is awesome. Which a year ago I never thought that people would be willing to do something like that. So you see people's hearts starting to shift and change as we do that. A big, massive shift was shifting one of our what we call life groups into a disciple making community. So 7 months ago, I told the people in our group, here's what I want to do. I want to build more accountability. I want to do this thing called a prayer calendar. I want to do this thing called a conversation quadrant, and then just do a discovery Bible study each week. And they really didn't know exactly what that meant because nobody had been through the training yet, but they said, okay. And so over the last 7 months, we've done that, and I've seen incredible change, and they have seen and acknowledged incredible change. All of the people in the group, including some of the younger middle schoolers and even elementary school students, every one of them has led a DBS. So 15 plus people have led. We cycled through everybody already. So sharing stories every week about sharing the story with people and engaging people, and that has really shifted the culture of that group and starting to bleed into the rest of the church. But again, slow, steady progress in the same direction has been critical in this whole journey for me. Somebody mentioned also shifting the outlook of what we're doing outside of the church. So we're not doing any kind of outreach stuff, but we're focusing on specific neighborhoods. We want to reach this community. We want to establish a long-term spiritual presence here, where we're trying to develop relationships with people, not just give them a backpack and send them on their way, which can be great, but we wanted to shift our focus in that regard as well. At the beginning of this year, as I'm wrapping this up, I gave the 21-day challenge. We said we're going to start the year going through my friend Jim's book. Anybody that wants, so this is to the whole church now, anybody that wants to join this 21-day challenge to becoming a disciple maker, let's do that. And so I had 16 people join me on that. Not all of them finished the journey, but several of them did. And one of them actually was from a church in Hawaii that was just visiting. I think I shared a little bit of that once upon a time, who got a bunch of books and sent them to Hawaii to his men's group, said, you guys got to go through this. It's just amazing. So I would describe the progress so far from of participation like a skinny triangle. So like me at the top and a handful of others, and everybody else, the rest of the church, kind of not really involved as you get toward the wider part of the pyramid. Now I'd say it's more like a diamond. So still narrow at the top, but more people helping and coming alongside me. But the church as a whole in the fat part of the diamond are doing something toward disciple making. And then, you've got the bottom part of the diamond, which are the people that are still kind of just existing. But it has been an awesome journey, one that I really questioned God on, because I thought I was done in ministry. And he said, no, you're not done. I've not released you. You're called to equip these people who wouldn't otherwise be exposed to what it is that I have in mind for disciple making. So it's been awesome. It's been incredibly challenging at times and lots of ups and downs, but I wouldn't have it any other way.
Awesome. Thank you, Trace. Hey, if you have questions for Kevin or Drake or Trace, you can put them in the chat and I'm going to just share. They all shared the things to do. And all of them were super helpful. I took some good notes on that. That's good stuff. I want to share a couple of things, just lessons I've learned of what not to do. And I'm not calling these, once again, like, don't ever do them. I'm just saying, I'm never going to do them again. Some other people might have go, hey, no, it worked for us. That's fine. But I want to just share a couple of those and then we'll open it up for a couple of questions and we'll break into our group. So here's some, I was going to make some do's and then all of a sudden I realized all of my stuff I had were started with don't. So first I just put this, and we heard this, I think, from all three guys, but is don't apply this without strongly first pursuing DMM yourself, that you better model it. So the idea of going, you better be, that's part of the idea of the lane one. Hey, we need to be in a community where we're modeling this out. You will reproduce who you are, not what you tell people to do, right? Which is one of the most amazing or annoying parts of parenting, but it's true with this as well. So modeling what you're casting vision for is your best motivator. Make sure you don't skip that step. A second one, I just heard a couple guys say this too, is don't talk about what I've learned. Don't talk about DMM, talk about disciple making. Obviously there's groups where you can, but DMM sounds like we're trying to change the whole thing that you're doing. Whereas disciple making, everybody already has a sense of feeling like I want to be in disciple making. And so just, man, if I could go back, I wouldn't have used those language until people were really in with me. Even the book came with that mindset. And I shared this before, and I'm going to put this in the chat. The group that had me write the book, they do sermon series with things. And if you're in Legacy Church and you're going, okay, how do I transition some people to disciple making? That's a link to that of how you got a whole church maybe to go through a series on people becoming disciple makers. I put another one was don't try to transition small groups to disciple making communities. Don't force it, but just make all of our groups, now all of a sudden they're going to care about this. Instead, even what Trace said there, hey, inviting people in, this is what we're going to do. But if you just kind of just put a new name on things and go, here's what we're going to do, man, I've not met somewhere that went real well. So making it really, really clear, hey, we're doing something different and inviting them into that has been really helpful. Don't force DBS in small groups either. Man, invite people to it. But I sure said, hey, every group, this is what we're doing, is DBS from now on. And a lot of people that were far from any of the DMM stuff just were not positive about it at all. And I realized I fought some battles for some things that weren't worth fighting with some people. And if I had said, hey, this is a great resource, will you try it out? That's great. But people that were far from it, I think I turned them against DMM as a whole because I forced DBS on them, and I wouldn't do that again. So, man, cast vision for it like crazy. I wouldn't push it on people. Don't just hand out the prayer calendar to everyone, or, get up front and say, here's what we're doing, everybody, and put a stack in the back. I mean, you can do that, but would say it won't work. Instead, hey, let everyone experience the prayer calendar long before you're really casting vision for it. So put a lot of people in your church on your prayer calendar. Get other people who are doing it, get them to put on it as well. And it'll spread, and people will get it when it goes organically. And one-on-one, you're saying, hey, do you want to try this out? Or they catch it in a training because they came to that. But not just this big giant, you'll get very few that'll do it, and it will last. So let it go more organically. Don't assume who will join lane one or those who are going to be all in with it. But that means cast vision to everybody. Man, some of the people that went with us are people I would never have thought would have. And some of the people that I thought, man, they're my best friends and they've been doing ministry with me for a long time. Of course, they're going to join. They didn't. So just saying, don't cancel out people for that. Here's another one I've just learned along the way. Don't let your identity come from who stays and who leaves. Jesus didn't do that, so you shouldn't either. And if you find yourself getting discouraged by going, man, what has happened to me as a leader? People are stepping out. Don't do that. We're living for an approval of one, for an audience of one. So yeah, your identity will go up and down if you do that. Don't discourage people from leaving. And that could be in two different ways. One is don't discourage them from starting DMM stuff outside of your church because they're living it out. That's the goal. So if you're going, I'm stopping people from that, you're missing the whole point. But also don't stop people who they really are getting, they don't want anything to do with disciple making. They won't use those words, but they really are pushing on all the small things you're doing. Let them go. It'll just save a lot of, probably got a lot of gray hairs from those conversations. So just say, would say that if they want to go as you're clearly conveying and not trying to push people, but let them go. That's fine. Don't use main gatherings to go through the training. Kevin shared that they didn't do that. I should have listened to Kevin's before I did that. I thought that was the big thing. We've been for 9 months moving in this direction. Now we're going to take the whole church in our main gatherings through the training. Man, that bombed. And we had a lot of people leave during that time. Just to encourage you, I think invite people to it, but don't make it, this is what we're now doing. Part of it too is, right, the training, you really need people that go, we're committed these next 6 weeks, but or 8 weeks, that not everyone comes every week. And so it just had all these people that kind of had pieces of it. I would encourage you, don't do it to everybody. Don't just share your disciple making stories. Let other people share their stories. In fact, I would say I shared too many of my own, and my stories, a lot of them were just too good, that actually intimidated people, and they thought, I can't do this. And so the longer we went, the less I was sharing. I mean, you guys too, right? You all have some really cool stories. The smaller stories, like someone just started their prayer calendar and they had this cool thing, the person wanted prayer. That's actually a better story than you talking about finding this person of peace and all these crazy things that happened. Oh, and then I put, don't forget, you're the one who changed. They likely didn't sign up for this. So no guilt trips. That's like the worst motivator. And so I think I shared before that we had everybody in our church one at a time over to our house, or family at a time over to our house for dinner. And as I shared the vision of where we were going, which none of them were surprised because we've been moving in this direction for a while, but I said, I want to let you know, you didn't shift, I did. I know this is not what you signed up for. And so, man, I would love to have you come with us. But if you don't, I understand. And I want to help you along the way of helping you figure out your next church and where you go to. Just remembering that, right? We've probably been on the journey a lot longer than they have. What you're inviting them to, it took you a while to get here. You probably, a lot of us on this call are early adapters. They're not. That's just how God wired them. And so making that easy for them to get that. Anyone who you've got to use guilt tactics, it's going to work out bad, not good. And then I put, don't skip prayer. And obviously for you, but also for the church, it may be the best pathway to finding those most interested. So that's the easiest one. Everyone knows they're supposed to pray. And as you start initiating more and more disciple making things into prayer, people will catch the vision for it. I sometimes feel like the prayer time is even better than the training, with people catching the vision. And then my last one I put is, don't get impatient with this group. This is the long game that you're taking with people. So you want to run with those who want to run. But if you're feeling like God's called you to remain in your legacy church, hey, love them and don't get ticked off with them that they're not moving forward. You've signed up for it. God's called you to that, and continue to walk with them through that and celebrate the steps that they take. And I put one do, and that is just continue to pray, asking God what he wants you to do with this church. That the number one thing we're asking people, and I love this, is one of the first things I feel like I caught from Chris, is just, we're not telling people to do what we do. We're telling people to do what God tells them to do. And that could be different things for different people. In fact, this call is a great representative of that, right? God's called us to different things. But just remember this too, his answer may change for you over time. So continue asking that. And then obey no matter what. And so it may be that he asks you to spend the next 20 years doing both. And that could be so glorifying to God. And that's awesome. And that's wonderful. Let me just say a quick thing as I end here would be speaking to the pastor that's staying in your legacy church role, because it's how I make a living. And there's a fear to step out. And you would go, I think God's calling me to actually go a different route, but I'm afraid of that. My testimony in 20 seconds would just be, I still call myself a pastor, but I'm just not paid by my church anymore. And we went through stages of lowering our income. And I would say where we're at now, that now I'm not paid as all a pastor, I've never enjoyed ministry more than I do now. And the way that I make a living, which is similar what Chris does, and well, he's been a coach for me and he has resources one option of how to help you with that. But man, has opened up all kinds of doors for ministry for me as well. So if there's a fear, like, I I just can't imagine getting there. Would just say that's been my journey the last couple of years. And there is great joy on the other side if God's call. That's an if, but if God's calling you to that route, and to just say He will provide, and He's sure provided for us in our lives. The website for Chris, that if you're thinking that, Tent Making Pastors, is that an S at the end, Chris? TentMakingPastors.com is one way, and that's what I'm doing as well. So we just spoke a lot, you guys, and I want to get us into groups like in the next 3 or 4 minutes. So are there any bullet questions that me or Kevin or Drake or Trace can answer? And then I really believe, hey, the heart of these meetings is in our breakout group. So I want to get us there. Any quick thoughts? Are there any in the chat room that are there, or anything someone wants to unmute and share?
I just have one quick question. This is Grace. I wanted to know, like in Drake's case and in Kevin's case, they're both founding pastors, or, in your case as well. I'm serving as a legacy pastor in a church that's 150 years old, and I have one person in my congregation who's in her 70s who was born into that church. So, and I've been there a little less than 5 years. I'm just wondering how that thinking shifts when I may not have that founding pastor cred to do that kind of leading.
I think that's Kevin, right? Kevin, Trace, and Drake planted. Kevin, would you have a quick word on that to share?
Yeah, our church is 220 years old. And Grace, I think that the only way to do it is to stay long enough, win the trust enough to have the influence kind of that, you'll never have the influence that a founding pastor has, but I think you can stay long enough and that you will become someone that they trust at that level. And then I think that gives you the freedom to do some things that you couldn't otherwise. I've been here for 18 years. So, it takes a little bit of time.
Awesome. That's really helpful, Kevin. Hey, and someone asked, can you explain the bamboo tree, Drake? Will you share that one more time with us?
Yeah, you bet. Sorry if that analogy didn't stick. A bamboo tree, obviously they grow rapidly individually, and so a bamboo forest reproduces very quickly. And it's actually one of the reasons that like sustainable paper products lean into bamboo. If you've ever paid attention to that. A banyan tree, you can Google it. It's one tree that grows up quite large in the middle, and as it expands, the branches they then drop back down into the ground. And so if you see a banyan tree forest, it'll actually look like a lot of trees when really it's only one primary tree with one giant root system. And so it's just a difference of multiplication versus addition. And that's what we're trying to focus on as a church, if hopefully that makes sense.
That's super helpful. Thank you, Drake. All right, I don't see any more questions on the side, and I want to get us to groups. So, hey, thanks, everybody. It's been awesome getting the lead the last several weeks, talking about casting vision. Let's keep doing it.